Nityam Bhagvat Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtiki Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham Karoti Vachanam Pangam Langyate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Parmananda Madhavam. Hare Krishna. We had finished our discussion on the third canto, chapter 1, verse 32. So we'll resume from the verse 33. Kachet Shivam Devakabhojaputriya Vishnu Prajaya Eva Devamatu Yavai Swagrabe Garbena Dadar Devam Trayatayagya Vitanamartham. As the Vedas are the reservoir of sacrificial purposes, so the daughter of King Devak, Bhoj, conceived the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her womb, as did the mother of the demigods. Is she Devaki doing well? So this conversation is an ongoing conversation between Uddhav and Vidur. So when Vidur first meets Uddhav on the banks of the river Ganges, so on the banks of the river Yamuna, sorry. So he, even though he knows that the Yadus have wound up their pastime and returned to the spiritual world, but he still asks. And this is also one way of him meditating on the special quality. This is Smaran. He's meditating on the qualities of these great personalities who are associates of Krishna. So in this verse, he's inquiring about Devaki. So he says, just like the mother of the demigods. And Devaki actually was Aditi in her previous life. So this was revealed by Krishna when he appeared in the jail cell. And then he had told Devaki that she was Prishni in a previous life. And in the next life, she was Aditi, and now she is Devaki. So Vidur also uses a very beautiful metaphor over here, and he calls her the Trayatha Yagya Vitatum Artham. So Trayatha Yagya Vitanam Artham means that the Vedas are impregnated with the real meaning of yagya, the real meaning of sacrifice, which is to please Krishna. So similarly, Devaki was impregnated with the real meaning of the Vedas, Swayam Krishna. So he compares her to Vedagarbha. That just like the Vedas deliver Krishna, Devaki delivered Krishna. Because there is really no difference between Krishna and the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna, and Krishna is the personification of Vedas. And the parallel also points that Krishna's birth is not a mundane birth, since he is the personified essence of Vedas. So one cannot read the Vedas and get Krishna. So one cannot extract Krishna by mundane effort. Similarly, Krishna did not take a what is a typical seminal birth from Devaki. Prabhupada says that there's actually no difference between the Vedas and the Lord. The Vedas aim at the understanding of the Lord, and the Lord is the Vedas personified. So Devaki is compared to the meaningful Vedas, and the Lord to the purpose personified. Okay, next verse, 34. Apisvedasate Bhagavan Sukham Vo Yaha Sattvatam Kam Dugo Niruddha Yamam Nanti Smahishabdayonim Manomayam Sattva Turiyatattvam. May I inquire whether Aniruddha is doing well? He is the fulfiller of all the desires of the pure devotees and has been considered from yore to be the cause of the Rig Veda, the creator of the mind, and the fourth plenary portion expansion of Vishnu. So in Dwarka Leela, Aniruddha is the grandson of Krishna. So he's the eldest son of the eldest son. Pradyumna is the eldest son, and Aniruddha is the eldest son. So Vidur is asking about Aniruddha, the personality in Dwarka, but he's also giving us an insight into who he is. So Aniruddha controls Ahankar in the mode of goodness, which is Gyan. And he is considered to be the predominating deity of the mind. So early on we had read that Ahankar in the mode of goodness is Gyan, and in the mode of passion is Karma, Kriya, and in the mode of ignorance is Dravya or matter. So Aniruddha is the predominating deity of Ahankar in the mode of goodness, or the deity of the mind. And from his breath arises the Rig Veda. So this is said in the Brihad Aranakya Upanishad. And he's also the fourth member of the Chaturvyuha. So Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And he is, of course, Shuddha Sattva, Vishnu Tattva. So in the Vishnu Dharmottara Markandeya Rishi, he's speaking to the great grandson of Krishna, Vajranav, who is the son of Aniruddha. And he says that the Lord of the universe, seen by me again and again at the end of the Kalpa, was unknown to me, since I was covered by illusion. When the destruction at the end of the Kalpa ended, I understood from Brahma that the Lord of the universe is your father, Aniruddha. So this is Markandeya Rishi. And then in Mahabharata, Bhishma he's speaking to Duryodhan about the divinity of Krishna. And then he relates that how Brahma came from Gandhamadan and then saw in his mind the Lord as Anirudh. So he says, having manifested Sankarshana, non-different from himself in potency from himself, the Lord manifested Pradyumna, non-different from Krishna. From Pradyumna he manifested Anirudh, whom the wise know as the indestructible Vishnu. Anirudh created me, Brahma, the maintainer of the worlds. Anirudh is non-different from Vasudeva, and thus I have been created by you. So this is Brahma indicating that Anirudh is the cause of Garbhodaksha Vishnu, who is the father of Brahma. Okay, next verse. Apisveddannecha nijatmadevam anannivritya samanuvataye hridika satyatmaja charudashena gadadya swasti charanti saumya. O sober ones, others such as Hridika, Charudishna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama, who accept Lord Shri Krishna as the soul of the self and thus follow his path without deviation, are they? Well. So Charudishna is one of the sons of Rukmani, and Gada is the younger brother of Lord Balram. So he's one of the other sons of Vasudeva and Rohini. Then Satyabhama had 10 sons, and her eldest son, Bhanu, was married to the daughter of Yudhishthir and Draupadi. The daughter's name was Suthanu. And he asked about Hridika. So there are two Hridikas. So one of the Hridikas is the son of Satyabhama. And Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Vidur is probably asking about him because the other Hridika is a much older ancestor. So he says the other Hridika is the son of Bhoj, and Hridika's son is Devamid, and Devamid's son is Shura, and Shura's son is Vasudeva, and Vasudeva's son is Krishna. So Hridika is the great-grandfather of Vasudeva. So that's why he opines that given the fact that he is asking about mostly young people, he's probably asking about the Hridika, who is one of the sons of Satyabhama. Next verse, 36. Api sadurabhyam vijay achyuta bhayam dharme na dharma paripati setam duryodhano tapyata yat sabhayam samraja lakshmaya vijayanuvratya. Also, let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhishthir is now maintaining the kingdom according to the religious principles and with respect to the path of religion. Formerly, Duryodhana was burning with envy because Yudhishthir was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjun as if they were his own arms. So in 6 verses, now Vidur will inquire about the Kuru Vamsha. And so even though the Kuru Vamsha is not in Dwarka, but there was a very close connection between Krishna and the residents of Hastinapur. They were frequently visiting each other. They were living for a long time. So the inquiry is relevant. And here he is specifically asking for Maharaj Yudhishthir. So he's glorifying Yudhishthir as one who lives and rules by religious principles, And also he's glorifying him for his close association with Krishna. And that Krishna protected him as if he was one of his own arms. Next verse, 37. Kim va kratagresh agamatyamarshi bhima bhivad dirgatmam vyamanucha yasyangripatam ranaburnasehe margam gadaya charuto vichitram. Please tell me whether the unconquerable Bhim, who is like a cobra, has released his long cherished anger upon the sinners. The field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club when he stepped on the path. So Vidur had not personally witnessed the battle of Kurukshetra because he had left and he was traveling on pilgrimage. But the tales of the battle of Mahabharata had already become legend. And people were talking about it, people were discussing about it. So Vidur knew a little bit of what happened through others. So he knew about the prowess of Bhima. And he says that the field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club. So Bhim was so ferocious that he would scare his own soldiers and animals. So it is said that when he would slap his forearms or he would yell his battle cry, and then the enemy, they would completely be stupefied with fear. But even his own soldiers would become unconscious with fear. He was so fearsome. And he's asking about whether Bhim was able to release his anger. So Vidur was personally present in the court when Bhim had taken all these vows that he would kill the 100 Kauravas, he would drink the blood of Dushasan, he would break the thigh of Duryodhan. So all these vows he had taken, and all these vows were like poison within him, waiting to be expelled. So he's asking that was Bhim able to do that. So actually it is said that in the battle of Mahabharata, from the side of the Pandavas, Bhim killed the most number of people. And from the side of the Kauravas, Drona killed most of the greatest number of soldiers. Prabhupada says that powerful Bhim did not take steps against the sons of Dhritarashtra for a very long time. Vidur's inquiry was whether he had yet released his anger, which was like that of a suffering cobra. When a cobra releases its venom after long cherished anger, its victim cannot survive. Okay, next verse, 38. Kaschit yashoda rathayuthapanam gandhi vadano pratariraste alakshito yachara kuta gudo maya kirato girishastutosha. Please tell me whether Arjun, whose bow bears the name Gandhi and is always famous amongst the chariot warriors for vanquishing his enemies, is doing well. He once satisfied Lord Shiva by covering him with arrows when Shiva came as an unidentified false hunter. So Vidur is now asking about Arjun. And he's talking about one of the incidents that makes Arjun famous. That Arjun was in the forest and he was hunting a boar. And then when he shot an arrow, then a local tribeman came and he said that actually you didn't kill the boar, I killed the boar. And this is my arrow. So Arjun got very upset. And then he said that do you know who I am? I'm Arjun. My arrow is always the first on the mark. So then they have a big fight, and the tribal, of course, is Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, of course, defeats Arjun, but he's very pleased with the battle that Arjun gave him. And as a benediction, he gives Arjun the Pashupati Astra. So Vidur is also talking about Gandiv, the famous bow of Arjun. So if you remember, Arjun got this bow during the pastime of the burning of the Khandav forest. And when he was getting ready to burn it, then he asked Agni for a suitable weapon. And Agni then requested Varun. So then Varun gave him this Gandiv bow and also gave him 2 quivers that were inexhaustible. And so Arjun's Gandiv was famous. And in the final pastime, when Arjun was going on the Himalayas, then Varun approaches Arjun again, saying that you don't need this where you're going. So Arjun agrees, and he drops the Gandiv into the ocean, and is taken back by Varun. So in the first canto, 5th chapter, there is this famous statement by Arjun to Yudhishthir, where he says that I have the very same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot drawn by the same horses, and I use them as the same Arjun, to whom all the kings offered their due respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them at a moment's notice have become null and void. It is exactly like offering clarified butters on ashes, accumulating money with magic wand, or sowing seeds on a barren land. Okay, next verse, 39. Yamavutasvit tanayo prathaya parthe vritau pakshmabhirakshinava premata udaya mride swaritam parat suparna vivavaj srivaktrat. Are the twin brothers who are protected by their brothers doing well? Just as the eye is always protected by the eyelid, they are protected by the sons of Pritha, who snatched back the rightful kingdom from the hands of the enemy, Duryodhan, just as Garud snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra, the thunderbolt carrier. So now they are talking about Nakul and Sahadev. So Nakul and Sahadev were sons of Pandu, but from Madri. And when Maharaj Pandu died, then both Kunti and Madri, they wanted to enter the funeral pyre, but Madri convinced Kunti to stay back to take care of her sons. So Kunti Devi was especially affectionate towards Nakul and Sahadev. And the 3 elder brothers were especially protective about them. So Vidur is glorifying them, that they were protected. And for their pleasure, the kingdom was returned to them from Duryodhan. So Prabhupada explains this pastime that is given, that Garud snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra. So this is a pastime that appears in Mahabharata, where Garud's mother Vinita once lost a bet with her sister and co-wife Kadru, who is the mother of the serpents. And then because of that, Vinita had to become a slave to Kadru. So then finally Kadru said, I'll free you if you get me the nectar. So then Garud went to the heavenly kingdom, and he picked the nectar up, and all the demigods were angry at him. But Garud is so powerful that he beat them all up. And then finally Indra threw his Vajra at him, and Garud didn't even notice it. And just as a courtesy to Indra, that yes, I acknowledge you have thrown your most powerful weapon at me, he dropped one feather just to show respect to him. And then he took the nectar and gave it to Kadru, and that's how he released his mother. So in the same way, the three elder Pandavas, they snatched back the kingdom from the hands of the Kauravas. Okay, verse 40, and then we can stop for some discussion. Aho prathapi driyate arbhakarthe raj rishi varyena vina pitena yastvaek viro adirato vijigye dhanur dvitiha kakubhas chatashra. Oh my Lord, is Pritha still living? She lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to live without King Pandu, who was the greatest commander and who alone conquered the four directions simply with the help of a second bow. So, as we have discussed, Vidur is now talking about Kunti Devi, and specifically the fact that she did not perform sati. So that is why the words start with aho. So aho is a form of, in Sanskrit, it is a form of exclamation and astonishment. So he expresses astonishment that Pratha is still living, even though it's a question, but it's a question that is in the mood of astonishment. And then he goes on to explain that why she continued to live, for the sake of the fatherless children. So this is, so in the Vedic etiquette, in the Vedic conduct, this is required, that if the children require the presence of a mother, then she is not expected to perform sati. Okay, so let me stop here. See if you have any questions or comments. Okay, so if none, we'll continue with verse 41. Saumya tamadapatantam pratre paritaya vidudreya niryapto yena suhurtsvapurya aham swaputran samunavratena. O gentle one, I simply lament for him, Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him I was driven out of my own house, although I am his sincere well-wisher, because he accepted the line of action adopted by his own sons. So you'll notice that Vidur, he does not inquire about the well-being of Dhritarashtra. He's just lamenting for him. For the others, he was saying, are they doing well? And Prabhupada gives the reason is that Vidur knew that there is no chance of the well-being of Dhritarashtra. But because of his close association, he is his elder brother, he has a very soft spot for him. So if you'll notice later on that he won't even inquire about Duryodhan or his 99 brothers, because he's indifferent to them. In a way, they are both the same. The Pandavas, they are the sons of one of Vidur's brother, and Kauravas are the sons of his other brother. So they are both his nephews. But for each of the Pandavas, he has asked individually, glorifying them. But Duryodhana and all, he does not ask. He really doesn't care about them, which is the nature of devotees, that they are generally indifferent. It's difficult for devotees to hate, but they're generally indifferent to those who are demoniac. For Dhritarashtra, because he has compassion, he is lamenting for him. And we'll see, or we have seen, that because of this compassion for Dhritarashtra, Vidur actually goes back and rescues him to some extent. He was too far gone, but to some extent he rescues him. And he says that by him I was driven out. So we had seen that actually nobody drove Vidur out. And if somebody drove him out, it was Duryodhana. But Vidur still says, by him I was driven out, because he was the head of the family and he was the king. So everything that was happening because either he explicitly or implicitly condoned him, which is why he took this decision. He could understand that Dhritarashtra was not supporting him. And then he says, although I am his sincere well-wisher. So he uses the present tense. So it's not that he was driven out and now Vidur is like becoming opposed to Dhritarashtra, that he drove me out, may all bad things happen to him. He's saying, I'm still his sincere well-wisher, which he demonstrates later on by going there and talking to him again. Okay, next verse, 42. Swam Hare Martya Vidambanena Drashonanam Chalvayato Vidhatu Nanyopalakshya Padamim Prasada Charami Pashyan Gatavisamyavatra. I am not astonished at this, having traveled all over the world without being seen by others. The activities of the personality of Godhead, which are like those of a man in this mortal world, are bewildering to others. But I know of his greatness by his grace, and thus I am happy in all respects. So what is Vidur not astonished by? So Vidur is not astonished by the previous verse. So he's not astonished that even though he was a well-wisher of Dhritarashtra, the same person humiliated and ejected him. He was not insulted, he was not astonished that the person who was like his own son, Duryodhana, insulted him in such an egregious manner. So Vidur is saying that I have traveled all over this world incognito and as a mendicant. So the reason that he's saying that he's not astonished, because he's seeing Krishna's hand there. So in his travels, he has become more and more renounced. He has associated with devotees. He has performed devotional service, taking baths in holy places, worshipping the deities. So, and he gives a glimpse over here that he says that I traveled everywhere as a mendicant, which means that he was only dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and incognito. So Vidur was a member of the royal family, and he was an influential member of the court. But he never revealed his identity. He never took any help or sustenance from his friends or family because of his because he could have based on his exalted position. But he completely relied on the mercy of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada said that is called Abhayam Sattva Samsuddhi. So Samshuddhi, so Shuddhi means purification, Samshuddhi means complete purification. And Sattva is in the mode of goodness. So one becomes Abhayam, one becomes fearless, but by this kind of Sattva Samshuddhi. And this kind of Sattva Samshuddhi comes when one is a Narayan Para. So when one is completely dependent on Lord Narayan, then his existence becomes purified. And the fear that manifests in all living entities becomes conspicuous by its absence. So Vidur is accepting the fact that all this was possible only by the mercy of the Lord. So Vidur was of course relative of Krishna, and he had been seeing Krishna for a very long time. However, it was when he was away from Krishna, when he was performing devotional service, at that time his faith and dependence increased, and Krishna revealed himself in his real form. So it's not that he had darshan of Krishna or he had some revelation, but he could understand the tattva by the mercy of Krishna. So Vidur is also saying over here that this sequence of events that caused him to leave the palace was actually the mercy of Krishna. He was happy, he was free, and he was in constant association of the Lord. Okay, next verse, 43. Nunam nripanam triyamadod pathanam mahim muhul shailyatam chamubi vadhat prapannati jihireshayesho apya upakshatkam bhagavan kuruna. Despite his being the Lord and being always willing to relieve the distress of sufferers, he, Krishna, refrained from killing the Kurus, although they committed all sorts of sins. And although he saw other kings constantly agitating the earth by the strong military movements carried out under the dictation of three kinds of false pride. So in the last 3 chapters of the verse, Vidur is now going to be talking about Krishna. And specifically, he is going to be requesting to hear more about Krishna. So he talks about the kings being agitated by 3 kinds of pride. And in the Mahabharata, it is said that education, wealth, and high birth are the 3 kinds of pride. And people who are infested with this are avoided by the wise. So he talks about Krishna over here, that he did not kill the Kurus. So Krishna was witness to all that Duryodhana was doing. And of course, Krishna being Krishna could have killed them at any moment. And then he also did not kill the other kings. So this is talking about the kings who were in alliance with Jarasandha. So he fought with them 17 times. But he would leave Jarasandha and his main associates alive, and they would come back again and again, and then he would fight. And the reason was that he had come to annihilate the miscreants. So So he had created this opportunity for the miscreants to come to him, and then either he or through his devotees, he would engineer their demise. So this is the same thing that Krishna says to Arjun in the 11th chapter as the Vishwarup, where he says that I have come here as time in order to decrease the unwanted population. And then he says, except for you, my dear Pandavas, all these kings are already dead. They have been already killed by me. Now it's up to you. You can become a weapon and be glorious in that. So he's talking about Krishna's mission over here. Next verse, 44. Ajasya janmotpatha nashanaya karmanya kartur grahanaya pumsham nanvanyatha ko arhati deva yogam paro gunana mutakarma tantram. The appearance of the Lord is manifested for the annihilation of the upstarts. His activities are transcendental and are enacted for the understanding of all persons. Otherwise, since the Lord is transcendental to all material modes, what purpose could he serve by coming to earth? So, Vidur here is talking about another aspect of Krishna. So the previous verse talked about the annihilation of the miscreants. So one may question that why should the Lord, who is full of Sat Chit and Anand, involve himself in such material affairs of sin and piety? And then Vidur is giving two reasons over here. So he says, although he is Ajasya, unborn, and Ajanma, although he is Ajasya, he takes birth, Janma, for Utpad Nashanaya, to annihilate the miscreants. And although he is Karmanya Akartur, so although he is without any fruitive action, he acts to attract all kinds of people. Grahanaya Pumsham, Karmis, Gyanis, and Bhaktis. So he's answering his own implicit question over here, that Krishna has come for this reason, that even though he's unborn, he takes birth to kill the wicked. And even though he has no desires to perform action, he does perform actions in order to attract all kinds of people. So the destruction, as we know, is the secondary activity. Sometimes Krishna does it himself, and sometimes he does it through his agents. But out of affection of his devotees, Krishna performs all kinds of activities. So he performs activities like when he's in Dwarka, he performs the morning yajna, gives in charity, is an ideal householder, and then he attracts the mind of the karmis through that. Then he speaks Bhagavad Gita, Uddhav Gita, high philosophy, and attracts the Gyanis. And then he performs these wonderful pastimes like Rasa Leela, Govardhan Dharan Leela, Kalya Daman Leela, and then he attracts the devotees. So when Krishna is acting in all this way, he's acting for the welfare of everyone. And because they got attracted to Krishna one way or the other, they were able to transcend their material existence. Okay, so we are at the last verse, verse 45. Tasya prapanakhil lokapanam avasthitanam anushashane sve arthaya jatasya yadusvajasya Vartam Sakhe Kirtya Tirtha Kirte. O my friend, please, therefore chant the glories of the Lord, who is meant to be glorified in the places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears by his causeless mercy upon the surrendered rulers of all parts of the universe. Only for their interest did he appear in the family of his unalloyed devotees, the Yadus. So Vidur has started the conversation with inquiries about the welfare of the Yadus and the Pandavas, and then he ends with an impassioned plea for Uddhav to sing the glories of Krishna. So he had previously stated that in his travel he has bathed in many holy rivers. Now he's asking Uddhav to bathe him in the nectar of Krishna Katha, indicating that the bathing in all the holy rivers can only qualify one to bathe in the ultimate holy river, which is the nectar of Krishna Katha. He had visited many tirthas, and now he says that tirtha kirte. Now he wants to visit the tirtha of the pastimes of Krishna. So pastimes of Krishna are sometimes compared to an holy place. So now he wants to stay there. So Prabhupada said the purpose of pilgrimages is to remember the Lord constantly. And therefore the Lord is known as Tirtha Kirti. The purpose of going to a place of pilgrimage is to get the chance to glorify the Lord. So Vidur glorifies Krishna as being affectionate to his devotees. And out of this affection, Vidur is saying, he who is unborn takes birth. And for the welfare of the surrendered kings. Tasya prapanna khila lokapanam. Then he appears in the Yadu Vamsa for the pleasure of his pure devotees, who are his relatives in the Yadu dynasty. Vidur in this verse, he does not mention about Krishna's destruction of the miscreants, because in the previous verse he has already established this as a secondary purpose. So here he is mainly wanting to hear about the glories of Krishna's pastimes with his devotees. And he's also laying his own claim to Krishna Katha. So he's saying to Vidur that I also belong to Krishna's family. Krishna has taken birth in my family. I am also a prapannam. I am also a soul that is surrendered to him. Therefore, I also qualify to receive his mercy in the form of being able to listen to his pastimes. So Vidur concludes his inquiry, but he does not ask about the welfare of Krishna. And this indicates that he's aware of the departure of Krishna from his Prakrit Leela. So he's asking for Krishna Katha. So Acharyas say the fact that Vidur is aware of Krishna's departure, the fact that Vidur is ardently praying for Krishna Katha indicates that Vidur is saying that now that Krishna has departed and I feel his separation intensely, please allow me to associate with him through his pastimes. Which is very similar to the statement made by Sutta Goswami to the sages. When the sages are said in the first canto, this is right in the first chapter, when they said that now that Krishna has departed, where will the religious principles go and take shelter? And then Sutta Goswami says that they will now take shelter in Bhagavad Puran. So same point is being made by Vidur. That while I'm aware that Krishna has gone, please give me shelter of his pastimes. So this is the end of the first chapter of the third canto. I'll stop here, see if there's any discussion.
Just a comment, Prabhuji. Like the other day, I was hearing only translations of the Bhagavatam, which I heard. Like I was feeling so much earlier. Also, I heard the translation, but now I am feeling so much difference with your classes. Like I could recollect some of the reasons that you mentioned at different points. So I just wanted to thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu.
Is it okay if I ask a question which may not be totally relevant?
Yes, Prabhu, go ahead.
I just want to switch off the fan. It's just making noise, sorry. We see the glories of Krishna and his devotees being glorified in this chapter and leading to more of it. But also we see, because it came up in the Srimad Bhagavatam class in the morning about this, because we were doing 9th canto, where it's full of a lot of things which are difficult to put together to see how to appreciate Bhagavatam. No, it's kind of unchaste wife and very attached Pururava, and on the other hand, killing of Gandharvas by Bharat, and 900,000 Gandharvas by Bharat, and then Lord Parashuram killing so many warriors and creating lakes of blood. These kind of things. Then how to understand why these things are there in Bhagavatam, although we say Bhagavatam is Amalam Puranam and it is supposed to invoke the devotion to Krishna. So this question came up, and we don't know how to. People are telling all kinds of things, but I would like to hear if anything else which can be useful or as a learning and preaching. Because when new person hears these things, they are going to be put off, saying that this is not I was expecting. So how we can, in the keeping that sensitivity of the newcomers, how we can tell them in a way that they will not feel repelled by the events which take place in the Bhagavatam, which are sometimes really difficult to digest.
Sure, Prabhu. Couple of thoughts. One is that there are parts of the Bhagavatam that are not meant for newcomers, and this has been one of the one of the instructions in the Bhagavad Gita, in different parts of the Bhagavatam, that this science should not be revealed to those who are averse or to those who are unfavorably inclined, because of this very reason, that some of these pastimes can bewilder them and put them off. So when preaching or when discussing in mixed company, then one should refrain from them. Ras Leela is a very famous example, right? That Krishna consorting with the wives of other men, and as devotees we can understand that they're all, Krishna is consorting with his own energy, and there is the Parakriya Bhav, which is a separate mode, but that requires several levels of surrender before we are even able to appreciate the fact that we have to appreciate it. Second point is that Bhagavatam, of course, is openly available, and whether we tell people or not, is possible that they might read it, or they might become aware of it. And there the understanding is that everything related to Krishna is ultimately glorious. So whether when Krishna protects or whether when he kills, it's glorious. When Parshurama was killing the Kshatriyas, that was glorious. because they were killed by the personality of Godhead. If they were living impious lives, and if they had continued to live those lives, then they would have just accrued more and more sins and condemned themselves to hellish planets. But because of the mercy of the Lord, their cycle of the self-perpetuating cycle of sin was terminated, and they got an opportunity to execute devotional service. And Krishna's protection to his devotees, it extends both ways. That he gives protection to his devotees by taking them under his shelter, and then he gives protection to his devotees by annihilating the non-devotees. So when we see pastimes of Krishna engineering the annihilation of millions and millions of people, then it's and this is something that will come up in the Vidur Maitreya discussion, that actually Uddhav says that actually they're more fortunate. He says those people who are killed by Krishna, they're more fortunate than me, because I call myself a so-called devotee and he has left me and gone back, but he killed them, which means that they're already waiting for him in his planets. So who is more fortunate? So now, of course, that becomes a little esoteric, but the matter of fact is that in a general way, when people are addicted to performing sins, then the cycle becomes self-perpetuating. There's no way for them to be rescued, because the more sin they commit, the more they develop the propensity, and they go down the hellish planets. And then Krishna comes as the well-wisher, and he rescues them. And he protects his devotees, and he performs wonderful pastimes for future devotees to be inspired by. And he also does mystical stuff, and he also does pastimes by which the atheist gets inspired. We'll see that in the third and the fourth chapter of this canto only. Is it okay, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I will still think about it a little bit more, and then I will ask you.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. If I can add a comment, I have heard from Arudha Mataji in her homeschooling seminars. She talks about how Bhagavatam, it presents all these situations, both the Vidya and the Avidya. She says, in the context of teaching children, specifically, even if there are adult topics, she says, children are going to come, they're going to see that anyway outside, in the media and so on and so forth. But when it is presented in the Bhagavatam, it's presented from the right perspective. And so when you present Vidya and Avidya side by side, then we get a right sense of what is the nature of material world and what is the nature of spiritual world. And so I just thought I'll make that comment too. And besides, I feel like Prabhupada's purports are always, it always points us to the right direction, regardless of what the context is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there is a verse in the Upanishad, right, that talks about one must study knowledge and nation side by side. Vidyascha 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 chadvedo bhaya saha. That by studying knowledge and nations on side by side, one actually gets liberation. So thank you for that point. Any other questions, comments? Okay, if not, then we'll start with the second chapter of the third canto, which is titled Remembrance of Krishna. So this chapter has 34 verses, and it's broken into two sections. The first 6 verses is a glorification of Uddhav. So Sukadeva Goswami, he describes the exalted position of Uddhav, and the rest of the chapter is Uddhav speaking about Krishna's disappearance, and he's speaking in the mood of separation and lamentation. Okay, so let's start with the second chapter, first verse. Shri Sukavacha iti bhagavata prestha kshatravartam priyashrayam prativaktum na chotsyaha Atkanthyat smartishvaraha. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, when the great devotee Uddhav was asked by Vidur to speak on the messages of the dearest, Lord Krishna, Uddhav was unable to answer immediately due to excessive anxiety at the remembrance of the Lord. So these 6 verses, 1 to 6, as I said, is going to be describing Uddhav's exalted position directly and indirectly. So Sukadeva Goswami here is talking about the condition of Uddhav. So he was fainting because of excessive prema, out of separation with Krishna. And it's interesting that earlier on, many years ago, Uddhav had gone to Vrindavan, and there he had advised the gopis not to lament because of physical separation. And then he had preached to them that Krishna is Parabrahman. He's there everywhere. He's there within you. And then he was surprised to see that how strongly the gopis were attached to the personality of Krishna. Now he's experiencing that himself. So he's still the same Jnani. He still knows that Krishna is everywhere within the heart. But just like the gopis, he's also lamenting in separation from the personality of Krishna. So while Uddhav is drowning in this ocean of sorrow, he also has a service to render. And Vishwanath Chakravarti says that just like a thorn is used to remove another thorn, Uddhav is going to meditate on Krishna to break his meditation on Krishna. So he's meditating on Krishna in this mood of love. And now he will meditate on Krishna's instructions. So Krishna had instructed Uddhav to instruct Vidur. So now he's going to be meditating on Krishna so that he can compose himself and prepare himself for talking to Vidur. Next verse 2. Ya panchahayano matra pratarashaya chitaha tannai chadrachayanyasya saparyamba lalilaya. He was one who, even in his childhood, at the age of 5 years, was so absorbed in the service of Lord Krishna that when he was called by his mother for morning breakfast, he did not wish to have it. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport that Uddhav was a Nitya Siddha, that right from his birth, he was liberated. And that is because of his strong attachment to worshipping Krishna. So it said that he used to play with dolls in the form of Krishna. He would serve the dolls by dressing, feeding, and worshipping them. So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this, saying that this absorption of Uddhav in Krishna at the age of 5 should be understood to be an initial form of deity worship. So the fact that it is said that he was so absorbed in the service of Lord, it points to Archa Vigraha Seva. So he was a child, but as a child, he was doing deity worship, and that's why he would not give that up just for even when his mother would call for breakfast. So Prabhupada in the purport quotes the Bhagavad Gita 6:41, Suchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Abhijayate. So this is Krishna saying that the fallen yogis, that if they fall in the neophyte stage, the Yoga Ruruksha stage, they take birth in opulent families. And if they fall in the advanced stage, the Yoga Rudra stage, then they're born in devotee families. And he says that because of their prior attraction, they quickly revive their attraction to Krishna. And Prabhupada also reminisces about his own childhood in the purport. As a child, he would worship Radha Krishna deities and conduct Rath Yatra with the other children in the neighborhood. Next verse 3. Sakatham sevaya tasya kalena jarasam gataha prishto vartam pratibruya bharato padavanu smaran. Uddhava served the Lord continually from childhood, and in his old age that attitude of service never slackened. As soon as he was asked about the message of the Lord, he at once remembered all about him. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Kale does not mean aged, because Uddhava as a pure devotee could not have felt the influence of time in terms of old age. And he quotes Bhagavatam 10:45-19 that even the most elderly inhabitants of the city appeared youthful, full of strength and vitality, for their eyes were constantly drinking the elixir of Lord Mukunda's lotus face. So this verse means that under the influence of bhakti, one does not feel the influence of age. So Uddhav, Prabhupada, he gives a more confidential understanding that the verse, in this verse, old is not really a function of time. Rather, it is a maturity of an experience. So Prabhupada says that Uddhav undoubtedly became old, but that does not mean that his spirit became old. His service attitude matured on the transcendental plane. And therefore, as soon as he was questioned by Vidur about Lord Krishna, he at once remembered his Lord by reference to the context and forgot himself in the physical plane. That is the sign of pure devotional service to the Lord, as will be explained later on. Lakshanam Bhakti Yogena, Yogasya, etc. in Lord Kapila's instructions to his mother, Devahuti. And then Prabhupada also, as a preaching point in the purport, he says that transcendental service to the Lord is never mundane. So other services, they may gradually decrease. If one is doing the same thing for a long time, then the people say that I'm tired of doing the same thing, I need a change. But devotees, the longer they do it, the more attracted they become to it. The more mature their realization and enjoyment is, as is evidenced by the description of Uddhava. Verse 4. Samuhurtam abhutushnim krishnangri sudaya brisham tivrena bhakti yogena nimagnaha sadhu nivrataha. For a moment, he remained dead silent, and his body did not move. He became absorbed in the nectar of remembering the Lord's lotus feet in devotional ecstasy. And he appeared to be going increasingly deeper into ecstasy. So this verse describes Smaranam, or the remembrance of Krishna by Uddhav. So as a devotee, that was his Sthai Bhav, that he was constantly meditating on Krishna. But then Vidur comes and he asks all these questions about Krishna, and they act as a stimulus, as a vibhav. So now he goes into this vibhachari bhav of intense affection. And the symptom is tushnim, that he is stunned. That's an anubhav. That's the symptom of the vibhachari bhav, this deepening of ecstasy. And it said sa muhurtam. So Prabhupada translates muhurtam as for a moment. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti takes the more literary translation. So Muhurat is 48 minutes, like we have the Brahma Muhurat. So the day is divided into different Muhurats of 48 minutes each. We'll study about it when we study in this canto only, when Maitreya Rishi explains the division of time. So Vishwanath Chakravarti gives a more literal translation that for 48 minutes, Uddhav, he remained silent, meditating. And this is actually laying the foundation of the Maitreya Vidur Samvad that will happen few chapters from now. But this is the beginning of that process, that Vidur has asked Uddhav, and now Uddhav he is withdrawn, and he's introspecting, and then he speaks. And then when he finishes speaking, then the foundation of the Maitreya Vidur Samvad, one of the longer conversations, it actually runs over 60 chapters, more than 2,700 verses of the Bhagavatam, that will be established. Okay, verse 5. Pulkobdina sarvango munchan miladrsha suchaha purnartho lakshitastena sneha prasar samplutaha. It was so observed by Uddhav that Uddhav had all the transcendental bodily changes due to total ecstasy, and he was trying to wipe away tears of separation from his eyes. Thus, Vidur could understand that Uddhav had completely assimilated extensive love for the Lord. So Vidur himself is a very advanced devotee, and he knows what are the symptoms of devotional, especially these exalted symptoms of ecstasy and devotion. So the reason Sukdev Goswami is bringing this to our notice is because he's establishing the credentials of Uddhav. So Vidur is going to ask Uddhav. Now Uddhav does not answer Vidur's questions, but he refers Vidur to Maitreya, saying Maitreya is as good as me. Actually, he says better than me. So what Sukdev Goswami is doing is that he's beginning to establish the credentials of this conversation that will happen. That he has already established the credentials of Vidur in the previous chapter. That how he was detached, how he was surrendered to Krishna, how he was purified. So Vidur has already been, his credentials have been established as the inquirer. And because Maitreya is going to be referred by Uddhav, now Uddhav's credentials are going to be established, and later on Maitreya's credentials will be established. So the point is that the conversation is between two very exalted personalities, which is why it is there in the Bhagavatam, which is why it is special. So Sukdev Goswami says, Pulakadbina Sarvango, which means that on all the parts of his body, Sarvango, his hair were standing in ecstasy. So it appeared his whole body was sprouting trees and shrubs. And he also became stunned, Damba. And tears were flowing from his closed eyes. And looking at him, Vidur could understand that Uddhava had attained prema. And because he was so absorbed, Samplata, and in this special situation where Krishna had departed, his prema had actually matured to sneha. Sneha is considered to be a more advanced stage and more intensified stage of prema. So through these feelings of separation, Uddhava is associated with Krishna in ecstasy, very much like he had observed the gopis. So when he was leaving Vrindavan, he had prayed for the gopis to be his special master. He had prayed to be the dust at the lotus feet of the gopis. So the gopis had perfected this Vipralamba Bhav. And we see that also appearing in Uddhava by the mercy of the gopis, because he was very kind to the gopis. That even though he had gone there for some purpose, but unlike Akrura, Uddhava, he stayed for several days there, and he satisfied them by Krishna Katha, and he developed genuine love and affection for them, and that's why he also got the mercy of the gopis. So Gurujan Prabhu mentions that Prabhupada also fell into ecstatic remembrance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Radha Krishna in 1967 in San Francisco. And he says the details of the event can be found in Leela Amrita in the first volume, pages 647 to 650. Okay, next verse. Shanakir Bhagavalokan Nadlokam Punaragataha Vimjaya Netre Viduram Pritya Bodha Utsmayan. The great devotee Uddhava soon came back from the abode of the Lord to the human plane, and wiping his eyes, he awakened his reminiscence of the past and spoke to Vidur in a pleasing mood. So this is the power of Smaran. So here Sukdev Goswami says that Uddhava was actually there in the spiritual world. So he came back to Narnam. Narnam is this planet Earth of the humans, Naras. So by the power of his Smaran, by the power of his meditation, he was not associating theoretically or conceptually or in imagination. He was actually there. But because he had a service to do, he came back. So this is why Vipralamba Bhav is considered to be so exalted, because there is no real separation. The mood of meditation becomes so intense that the separation becomes constant association. So Uddhava is described as Utsmayan, that he is amazed by the pastimes of Krishna. And what is the pastime? So he's specifically thinking of an instruction that Krishna gave him. So Krishna tells him, "O Uddhava, please return to answer the questions of Vidur." And in obedience to those instructions, Uddhava is again and again getting himself back. So the first time, and if you remember in the towards the end of the first chapter, we see again Uddhava was entered into this trance of absorption, Vidur spoke about Krishna, now here again, he had gone into that meditative trance, and he's again bringing himself back now, because he wanted to, because for a devotee, following the instructions of Guru and Krishna is much more than simply getting pleasure out of devotional service. So for a devotee, the most important thing is to follow the instructions of the Lord and Guru. And Prabhupada, in the purport, he describes the various stages of bhakti as explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so we have gone over, Prabhupada explains these at several times. We have gone over it a few times in the past, so I'm not going to go over it again. And it's basically nectar of devotion, as explained by Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami. Okay, I'll do one more verse and then we'll stop and see if there's any discussion. So this is the first verse that Uddhav says. Uddhav Uvacha Krishna Dyumani Nimlase Girneshva Ajigarane Naha Kim Nuna Kushalam Bruyam Gata Sishu Graheshwaham. Sri Uddhav said, my dear Vidur, the sun of the world, Lord Krishna, has set, and our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. What can I say to you about our welfare? So, in 5 verses, Uddhav is going to be describing to Vidur the unfortunate situation of the Yadus in the absence of Krishna. And as per Srila Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this verse represents, so Uddhav has been described as somebody who is enormously intelligent, disciple of Brahaspati, counsel of Krishna. And we see that in this verse. So we see how to handle difficult conversations. So sometimes corporations, they have these training courses on how to handle difficult communications. And we see Uddhav masterfully handling it. So in this verse, we see that he makes 5 points that are considered to be as essential components in handling difficult conversations. First point that he makes is direct. So he does not sugarcoat. So he's giving news that is bad news, devastating to Vidur, that Krishna has left. But he says it directly, that my dear Vidur, Krishna has gone. Second point is empathy. So the greatest support that one can give to one who is grieving is empathy. So Uddhav says, Kim no na kushalam bruyam. That how can I describe the condition of us, his friends? Which means Uddhav is saying, I can understand your pain because even I am feeling that pain. So empathy is a very strong foundation for sharing emotions. That yes, I hear you, I understand you, I feel what you are feeling. So right away after Krishna, Uddhav gives him the news Krishna is gone, he says Kim no naha. So now he says is a collective pronoun. He's saying that you, me, and so many others are also feeling the same grief. You're not alone. Third point he gives is the philosophical understanding, right? So he says that has Krishna actually gone? Krishna has gone, but has he actually gone? And Prabhupada gives the analogy of the sun in the purport, the famous analogy of the sun rising and setting, but the sun being there. So Uddhava is making this point that the sun of Lord Krishna has set. But when he's saying that the sun has set, then he's also saying that the sun is still there. It's just that it has risen in some other place. So he's giving this philosophical understanding to Vidur. Fourth point is acknowledgement. That Uddhava is acknowledging the real relationship between Krishna and Vidur. So he's saying that the birth and the activities of Krishna are real since they are eternal. So this is extending the analogy of the sun, that the sun is eternal. So everything concerning it is real. So in the same way, Vidur's relationship with Krishna is not only real, but eternal. So he's acknowledging the fact that Vidur was somebody that loved Krishna and loved by Krishna, and that love is eternal. And the fifth point that he's making is giving is that of caution. So as a true well-wisher, Uddhav now cautions Vidur. So when there is darkness, then the Chakravarti bird laments and the lotus flowers wither. And Uddhav says that our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. So when there is darkness, then thieves and dacoits and ghosts and rakshasas become happy. So he's cautioning Vidur that difficult times are ahead. So be careful. People who are impious will flourish. You're a pious person, so you be careful. So just to understand this analogy, a parallel statement is a person who is giving another person the news of the person's friend passing away. The statement would be, your friend has died. We are all saddened by his demise and feel your pain. But what to do? Time is inevitable. Everybody dies, but the soul is eternal. So you have always been his true friend. And I'm sure wherever he is thinking fondly of you. However, now that your friend has gone, please take good care of your own health and well-being. So this is Uddhav demonstrating perfectly empathic communication. Okay, so let me stop over here. Sorry, I went a little bit over time. See if there's any comments or questions.
The Krishna Prabhuji, one quick question. Like, with Uddhav, at what point, like, he been to Vrindavan and sharing that Krishna Katha, at what phase of his life or in the overall bigger scheme?
So this was when Uddhav was in Mathura. So when Krishna went from Vrindavan to Mathura, then he sends Uddhav as his messenger to pacify the gopis. So this is where the famous conversation with Uddhav and gopis happened. And then the Brahmar Gita is from that time.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, one question. How to understand this when he said that the great soul devotee Uddhav soon come back from the abode of the Lord to the human plane? That means when Krishna departed, he departed, but he came back just to answer Vidur.
So he did not depart in body. So this was explained as the power of Smaran, that the meditation is so strong that even though your body may be here, but for all practical purposes, you are in the spiritual world. Like we see that with Rupa Goswami, the Goswamis also, when they would chant, they would actually enter into Krishna Leela. So it's not that they would witness it, but they would actually enter it. So this is the power of meditation in its most potent form.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The fourth point you said love is eternal. I'm sorry I missed the. Could you speak a little bit about it? Like where in the verse is like in the translation when I look at it, I'm wondering where the fourth point is made.
So the fourth was acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Okay.
So the acknowledgement.
Not the first, the fourth point.
So the first is direct communication. The second is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Third is philosophy.
Yes.
Fourth is acknowledgement.
Okay.
And fifth is caution.
Is it, Prabhu, is it similar to Arjuna and Yudhishthir Maharaj conversing in the first canto when Arjuna returns from Prabhas Kshetra, after Krishna leaves, or the Yadu dynasty gets annihilated, and he comes back to see Yudhishthir, and then I think it's very similar, is it, or is there any difference in that conversation? Like the mood and how they are trying to share with each other sad news?
There is similarity because both of them are devotees very closely attached to Krishna, feeling Krishna's separation. I think in terms of the details, I'll have to think a little bit more because Arjun's mood was a little bit. He was more. So Vidur is more. If you see Vidur's mood is that he's more extending himself to. Uddhav is extending himself to Vidur, and Arjun's mode was more inward looking. That he had already wound up his. Connection. He was ready to give up everything, so he was more inward focused. And Uddhav, because he still had this one last service to do, you can see that he's now focusing on Vidur, at least for now. After that he leaves. But in general, you're right. I think the mood is very similar. They're both close associates of Krishna, experiencing the grief of his immediate separation.
I remember in that conversation, one thing that the bearer of the bad news is also equally sinful or something along that line. So that's why they don't give out the bad news first. This is something I don't know whether I heard from the class or from Maharaj. I'm just trying to remember because here Uddhava is directly first thing he's saying is Krishna is gone. Whereas in the Arjuna Yudhishthira Maharaj's conversation, it was more indirect. It was not directly said in the first place itself. So I don't know whether you recollect that, but this is my recollection.
I don't. I mean, if you're saying I trust you, but doesn't come to my recollection.
But Prabhuji, here Vidur also kind of know, right, Prabhuji? So in that case, Uddhav being direct is not a shocking news for Vidur. He is also mentally prepared.
Vidur knows you're right, and yeah, your point. The Vidur knows, so Uddhav doesn't want to sugarcoat it. And there's some level of metaphors also used over here. So even though Uddhav is speaking directly, but as Prabhupada explains, the fact that he is using through the metaphor of the sun, he is sugarcoating it also at the same time. So just like the sun sets but doesn't actually get destroyed, so he's saying that Krishna is gone, but Krishna is still there. So he's speaking directly, but he's also sugarcoating it with philosophy at the same time.
Ruchi, I was thinking, so like you were talking about empathy, right? So this empathy, Uddhava feels empathy because he himself was feeling the same pain from the separation, right? So or he could understand from the distress that he felt himself. So is it important to feel the same kind of emotion to have empathy, or can we empathize without feeling it, without experiencing it out?
We can empathize without having been in the same situation. In this case, you're right. Both Uddhav and Vidur are almost in identical situations. Uddhav more so, because Uddhav was closer to Krishna. But generally speaking, in communication, the strongest bond in communication is empathy. So empathy doesn't mean that you feel what the other person is feeling. Empathy means that you understand what the other person is feeling. So empathic communication is the phrases that are recommended to be used in empathic conversations is, I hear you, I see what you're saying, I get where you're coming from. So these are just like phrases that generate this mode of empathy. Of course, it needs to come from a sincere platform. But for a communication to be effective, this is more from mundane psychologists, but they say that empathy is the most powerful tool in making communications effective. Whether you're communicating up or down or peers, empathy works in all situations.
Right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we'll stop over here. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.